Growing up in Maple Grove Estates, I never quite felt like I belonged. The massive houses, perfectly manicured lawns, and luxury cars in every driveway seemed to mock our modest living situation. I'm Emma Mitchell, and my story begins with a barbecue that changed everything. My parents, Thomas and Linda Mitchell, moved into 156 Maple Drive when I was just 5 years old. Back then, the neighborhood was different, warmer, more welcoming. But as property values skyrocketed and wealthy families moved in, the spirit of community slowly eroded into something cold and exclusive. Our house stood out like a sore thumb. While others renovated and expanded, we maintained our simple two-story home the best we could. Dad worked as a high school teacher, and Mom ran a small flower shop downtown. We weren't poor, but compared to our neighbors, we might as well have been living in poverty. Sarah Henderson, who lived in the mansion next door, never missed an opportunity to remind us of our place in the social hierarchy. Her husband James, CEO of a tech company, would smirk from behind his imported cigars whenever we crossed paths. They represented everything wrong with what Maple Grove had become: wealth without warmth, success without soul. The annual neighborhood barbecue had always been a tradition, dating back decades. This year, it was the Hendersons' turn to host. Mom didn't want to go, but Dad insisted we maintain appearances. "We have as much right to be here as anyone else," he'd said, straightening his collar in the mirror. If only he knew how right he was. That afternoon, I helped Mom prepare her famous potato salad. "Maybe this year will be different," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. I nodded, not believing it either. As we walked next door, carrying our contribution to the potluck, I couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was about to happen. The Hendersons' backyard was packed with the neighborhood alight. Women in designer sundresses clustered around the pool, while men in polo shirts discussed stock portfolios and golf handicaps. Sarah spotted us immediately, her perfectly Botox face twisting into a practiced smile. "Oh, the Mitchells," she called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "How nice of you to join us. Linda, dear, you can put that." She gestured vaguely at Mom's potato salad. "Over there with the other dishes." I watched Mom's face flush as she placed her carefully prepared dish among the catered spreads. Dad squeezed her hand, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. We found seats at an empty table near the edge of the party. The only empty table, I realized with a sinking feeling. As the afternoon wore on, the subtle jabs became more frequent and less subtle. Sarah's voice carried across the yard as she discussed property values with her equally wealthy friends. "It's just that some properties really bring down the neighborhood's appeal," she said, looking pointedly at our house. "Don't you agree, James?" James Henderson lowered his crystal tumbler of scotch and nodded sagely. "Absolutely, darling. We've discussed this with the Homeowners Association. Perhaps it's time to implement some new standards." My blood boiled, but years of enduring their condescension had taught me to keep my composure. I was about to suggest to my parents that we leave when I noticed an unfamiliar figure walking up the Hendersons' driveway. The man wore an impeccable suit that made even James's designer outfit look cheap. He carried a leather briefcase and moved with purpose. As he approached the gathering, conversations quieted and heads turned. "I'm looking for Emma Mitchell," he announced, his voice clear and professional. Sarah's eyebrows shot up as I stood. "That's me," I said, trying to ignore the whispers that erupted around us. The man nodded and extended his hand. "Jonathan Pierce, from Pierce & Associates Law Firm. I represent the estate of Harold Montgomery. Might we speak privately?" The name hit me like a thunderbolt. Harold Montgomery, my grandfather, whom I'd never met. He'd had a falling out with my father decades ago, long before I was born. All I knew about him came from old photographs and whispered conversations. Sarah, unable to contain herself, sashayed over. "Now surely any business can wait until after our little gathering," she said, placing herself between me and Mr. Pierce. We wouldn't want to disrupt the party. Mr. Pierce's expression remained neutral, but his eyes hardened slightly. "I'm afraid this matter is rather urgent, Mrs. Henderson. Or should I say, tenant?" The word hung in the air like smoke. Sarah's perfect smile faltered. "I beg your pardon. Perhaps we should all sit down," Mr. Pierce suggested, opening his briefcase. "This concerns the entire neighborhood, actually." The next few minutes felt surreal as Mr. Pierce explained that my grandfather, Harold Montgomery had been the actual owner of all of Maple Grove Estates. He purchased the land decades ago but chose to live elsewhere, allowing a management company to handle the properties. The Hendersons, like everyone else, had been renting from him all these years through a complex network of shell companies. Your grandfather passed away last month, Mr. Pierce continued, addressing me directly. In his will, he left the entire estate, including all of Maple Grove, to you, Miss Mitchell. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah's face had gone pale, her manicured hand clutching James's arm so tightly her knuckles turned white. Around us, our neighbors stared in shocked disbelief. That's impossible, James sputtered, finally finding his voice. We own this house. We have the deed. You have a carefully crafted lease agreement, Mr. Pierce corrected, producing a stack of documents. Your monthly property taxes have actually been rent payments. Mr. Montgomery was quite brilliant in how he structured everything. I sat there, struggling to process what I was hearing. The house I'd grown up in, the neighborhood that had made me feel so inferior, it had all belonged to my grandfather. And now, somehow, it all belonged to me. There must be some mistake, Sarah said, her voice rising. We've lived here for 15 years. We've invested hundreds of thousands in renovations, all of which were approved through the management company as per your lease agreement, Mr. Pierce replied calmly. Miss Mitchell now has full discretion over all properties in Maple Grove Estates. I looked at my parents, who appeared equally stunned. Dad's face showed a mix of emotions: shock, confusion, and something else. Pride? Regret? I couldn't quite tell. If you'll excuse us, Mr. Pierce said, standing, Miss Mitchell, and I have some paperwork to discuss. Shall we use your study, Mrs. Henderson? After all, it is Miss Mitchell's property now. As I followed Mr. Pierce into the house, I heard the party dissolving into chaos behind me. Sarah's voice rose above the others, demanding answers, making threats about lawyers and lawsuits. But for the first time in my life, her words had no power over me. Inside the Hendersons' study, Mr. Pierce laid out the full scope of my inheritance. The neighborhood was just the beginning. There were other properties, investments, and accounts I needed to know about. But my mind kept returning to one detail. Did he know? I asked suddenly. My grandfather, did he know how they treated us? Mr. Pierce's expression softened slightly. Mr. Montgomery had eyes and ears everywhere, Miss Mitchell. He watched you grow up from afar, saw how you and your parents handled adversity with grace. In his final years, he spoke often of how proud he was of the family you'd become. Tears welled up in my eyes as I thought of the grandfather I'd never known, watching over us all these years. Outside, I could hear the party completely falling apart as neighbors rushed to their phones, presumably to call their lawyers. What happens now? I asked, wiping my eyes. That, Miss Mitchell, is entirely up to you. The properties, the leases, the future of Maple Grove, it's all in your hands. I nodded, a plan already forming in my mind. The Hendersons had spent years making us feel small, but now the tables had turned. The real question was, what kind of landlord did I want to be? The next morning, I woke up to chaos. News of my inheritance had spread through Maple Grove like wildfire. My phone was flooded with messages, some congratulatory, others panicked, and many from neighbors suddenly wanting to reconnect. Sarah Henderson's number appeared repeatedly, her voicemails growing increasingly desperate. James had apparently spent the night calling every lawyer in the city, only to discover that my grandfather's legal team had ironclad documentation for everything. I sat at our kitchen table, watching Mom prepare breakfast like any other morning. But everything felt different now. Dad kept glancing at the window, where a small crowd of neighbors had gathered, presumably hoping to catch a glimpse of the neighborhood's new owner. What are you thinking, sweetheart? Mom asked, placing a plate of pancakes in front of me. I took a deep breath. I'm thinking about Grandpa, why he did this, what he wanted me to learn. I paused, cutting into my pancakes, and I'm thinking about all the families like us who got pushed out of this neighborhood over the years. Dad looked up from his coffee. Your grandfather, he was a complicated man, Emma. We had our differences, but he always had a strong sense of justice. A knock at the door interrupted our conversation. Mr. Pierce stood there, looking fresh despite the early hour. Good morning, Miss Mitchell. I thought you might want to review the current lease terms. There are some interesting clauses we should discuss. As we went through the documents, a picture emerged that made me smile. My grandfather hadn't just been a shrewd businessman, he'd been playing a long game. The leases all contained provisions that gave the owner extraordinary control over rental terms and community standards. So, I said, looking up from a particularly interesting clause, I could essentially rewrite the entire rental agreement. With proper notice, yes, Mr. Pierce confirmed. Your grandfather ensured maximum flexibility for the property owner. I spent the next few hours drafting new terms with Mr. Pierce's help. By afternoon, we had everything ready. I called for a mandatory community meeting at the neighborhood clubhouse, another property I now owned. The clubhouse was packed that evening. Every resident of Maple Grove had shown up, their faces a mix of worry and curiosity. Sarah and James Henderson sat in the front row, trying to maintain their usual air of superiority despite their obvious distress. Thank you all for coming, I began, standing at the podium. As you've heard, I'm now your landlord. I've spent the day reviewing everyone's lease agreements and I've decided to make some changes. A murmur ran through the crowd. Sarah's hand shot up immediately, but I continued speaking. First, all current rents will be adjusted based on a fair market value assessment, not the inflated rates many of you have been paying. Second, I'm establishing a community board that will include representatives from all income levels. And third, I paused, making eye contact with Sarah. Any form of discrimination or harassment based on economic status will result in immediate lease termination. The room erupted. James Henderson jumped to his feet. This is outrageous. You can't just change everything overnight. We have rights. Actually, Mr. Henderson, Mr. Pierce interjected smoothly. According to your lease agreement, she can. Would you like to review the terms you signed 15 years ago? As James sputtered, I continued. I'm not interested in revenge. What I want is to restore this neighborhood to what it was meant to be, a community where people of different backgrounds can live together with respect. I pulled out another document, which brings me to the Hendersons. Sarah, James, I've reviewed the numerous complaints against you from other residents. The hostile environment you've created, the discriminatory comments, the attempts to force out families who don't meet your standards, it all violates your lease terms. Sarah's face had gone from red to white. You wouldn't dare. I'm exercising my right to terminate your lease, effective immediately. You have 30 days to vacate the property. The silence that followed was broken by a small sound. Someone was clapping. Then another person joined in, and another. Soon half the room was applauding. I saw relief on faces I recognized from years of shared subtle humiliations at the Hendersons' hands. This isn't over, James threatened, standing to leave. Our lawyers will. Your lawyers will find that everything is perfectly legal, Mr. Pierce interrupted. Miss Mitchell, should I show them the documentation your grandfather kept of their lease violations over the years? The Hendersons stormed out, but I wasn't done. One more thing, I announced to the remaining residents. I'm establishing a scholarship fund for local students in a community improvement program. The focus will be on making Maple Grove accessible to families of all income levels while maintaining the quality of life for everyone. Over the next few months, Maple Grove transformed. The Hendersons moved out, their mansion converted into a community center with after-school programs. Other wealthy residents who couldn't accept the changes followed, making room for new families who brought fresh energy to the neighborhood. We kept our modest house exactly as it was, though Mom finally got the garden she'd always wanted. Dad retired from teaching but volunteered at the community center, mentoring kids who reminded him of his younger self. One evening, as I sat on our porch watching children play on lawns that had once been off-limits, I found an old photograph in my grandfather's papers. It showed him standing in front of Maple Grove decades ago, when it was just empty land. On the back, he'd written, "Build something that matters." Sarah Henderson still lives in the city. Sometimes I see her at the grocery store, driving a much more modest car these days. She always looks away quickly, but I notice she no longer carries herself with that same arrogant pride. Last week, I received a letter from a young girl who recently moved into the neighborhood with her single mother. "Thank you," she wrote, "for making a place where we don't have to feel ashamed." I keep that letter on my desk, next to my grandfather's photo. He built something that mattered, all right, not just properties and investments, but a legacy of justice. And now it was my turn to carry it forward. The wealth he left me wasn't just in real estate and bank accounts. It was in the lesson he taught me through this inheritance. True richness isn't measured by the size of your house or the car you drive, but by the community you build and the lives you touch. As I watch Maple Grove flourish, growing more diverse and vibrant with each passing day, I think about how sometimes the greatest revenge isn't in making others suffer, but in creating something beautiful from the ashes of their cruelty. And in the end, that's worth more than all the mansions in the world. The Parker family estate looked exactly as I remembered it. A sprawling Georgian mansion set against manicured lawns, every brick and window screaming old money and older pride. I sat in my car, watching the sun set behind the house where I'd grown up, where I'd learned that the Parker name meant everything, and where 5 years ago they told me I was nothing without it. I'm Sophia Parker, though my family would argue I lost the right to that name the day I walked away from Parker Industries to build something of my own. Now I was back, not as the prodigal daughter seeking forgiveness, but as their last chance at survival. Though they didn't know that part yet. The family meeting had been called urgently. Parker Industries, the technology empire my grandfather built from nothing, was facing bankruptcy. Years of mismanagement by my Uncle George and cousin Peter had finally caught up with them. They needed investors, fast. What they didn't know was that I already owned 40% of their company through various shell corporations. And tonight, I'd decide their fate. The front door opened before I could knock. My mother stood there, elegant as always in her designer dress, her disapproval evident in every line of her face. "You're late," she said by way of greeting. "Hello to you too, Mom." I stepped past her into the marble foyer, my heels clicking against the floor. The sound echoed through the house like an intruder's footsteps. The great room was packed with family members, uncles, aunts, cousins, all gathered for the emergency meeting. Conversations hushed as I entered. My cousin Peter, now CEO of Parker Industries, stood by the fireplace in an expensive suit that couldn't hide his nervous fidgeting. "Well, look who decided to grace us with her presence," Uncle George's voice boomed across the room. The great independent businesswoman herself. I smiled tightly. If he only knew that my little consulting business was actually Nova Investments, the corporation they were desperately hoping would save them. "Uncle George," I nodded, still running the company into the ground. His face reddened. "How dare you? You know nothing about running a real business. You abandoned your responsibilities, your family legacy." I chose my own path, I cut him off. Something this family never understood. My father stepped forward, his expression stern. "Sophia, we didn't invite you here to rehash old arguments. We're facing a serious situation. The company's in trouble," I stated simply. "You need investors." Peter shifted uncomfortably. "We have interested parties. Nova Investments has made an offer." "Nova?" I raised an eyebrow, enjoying their ignorance. "The same company that's been buying up your competitors." "They see our potential," Uncle George insisted, "unlike some people who turned their backs on their birthright." I thought about the documents in my briefcase, proof of years of mismanagement, failed projects, and questionable decisions that had brought Parker Industries to its knees. "Birthright?" I laughed. "Is that what you call running grandfather's company into bankruptcy?" The room erupted in angry mutters. My mother touched my arm in warning. "Sophia, please, this isn't helping." "No, let her speak." Uncle George stepped closer, his face twisted with rage. "Let her tell us how she knows better than everyone else. How her tiny consulting firm makes her an expert on our business." I met his gaze steadily. "I know enough to see that Parker Industries is 3 months away from complete collapse. Your tech division is bleeding money, your new product line is stalled, and your stock price is about to plummet." "How do you know about the product line?" Peter demanded. "That information wasn't public." I smiled. "I make it my business to know things, cousin. Just like I know about the failed Singapore expansion you tried to hide from the board." Uncle George stepped forward, looming over me. "You're nothing without the family name," he roared. "Nothing. You think your little success story impresses anyone? Leave and never come back." The room fell silent. Even my father, who had always tried to play peacemaker, said nothing. "George," my mother started, but he cut her off. "No, Catherine, she needs to hear this. 5 years ago, she walked away from everything we built. Everything her grandfather sacrificed for. She's not a Parker anymore." I opened my briefcase slowly, pulling out a single document. "Actually, Uncle George, I think you'll find I'm more of a Parker than you realize." "What's that supposed to mean?" It means, I said calmly, that while you were busy running this company into the ground, I was building something better, something worthy of grandfather's legacy. Peter snatched the paper from my hand, his face going pale as he read. This can't be right. What is it? Uncle George demanded. These are stock purchase records, Peter whispered. From Nova Investments. They've been buying shares through shell companies for years. So, my uncle's voice held a note of uncertainty now. The shell companies. Peter looked up at me, realization dawning in his eyes. They all trace back to you. The room erupted in chaos. My mother gasped. My father stepped forward, reaching for the document. Uncle George's face turned an alarming shade of purple. That's impossible, he sputtered. You couldn't afford, you don't have the resources. I've owned 40% of Parker Industries for the past 2 years, I said quietly. Every board meeting, every major decision. I've been there. Watching. Learning exactly how badly you've mismanaged my grandfather's legacy. Lays. Uncle George lunged for me, but my father held him back. It's true, Peter confirmed, still reading. She's been buying shares since she left, small amounts at first, then larger blocks as our stock price fell. Through Nova Investments, I added. The company you're so desperate to take money from. Understanding rippled through the room. My cousins whispered among themselves. My aunts clutched their pearls in shock. Uncle George had collapsed into a chair, his bluster gone. Why? My father asked quietly. Why go to all this trouble? Because you never understood what the Parker name really meant, I replied. Grandfather built this company from nothing. He took risks, innovated, put everything on the line. But you? I looked at Uncle George. You just rode his coattails, claiming birthright while running his dream into the ground. So this is revenge? My mother asked. I shook my head. No, Mom, this is business. Tomorrow, Nova Investments will make its final offer to buy controlling interest in Parker Industries. You can accept, or you can watch the company collapse when I sell my shares. You wouldn't. Uncle George found his voice. You're bluffing. I pulled out my phone, dialing a number on speaker. Marcus, begin phase 2. Yes, Ms. Parker. Releasing the Singapore reports to the press now. Stock should begin dropping within the hour. Uncle George lunged for my phone, but I stepped back smoothly. Those reports are sealed. We're sealed, I corrected. Amazing what you can access when you own 40% of a company. As if on cue, phones began buzzing around the room. Family members pulled them out, gasping at news alerts about Parker Industries' failed expansion and hidden losses. You'll destroy us, Peter whispered. No, cousin. You did that yourselves. I'm offering salvation, at a price. What price? My father asked. I smiled, thinking of all the times they dismissed my ideas, belittled my ambitions, told me I was nothing without the family name. Complete control, I said simply. Nova Investments will assume majority ownership. A new board will be appointed, and Uncle George and Peter will resign, effective immediately. You can't do this, Uncle George shouted, finding his fury again. I won't let you. Let me? I cut him off. You seem to be forgetting something, Uncle. I'm not asking permission. I'm telling you how this ends. The silence that followed my announcement was deafening. Outside the grand windows of our family estate, darkness had fallen, but inside harsh truths were coming to light. My uncle's face had lost all color. My cousin Peter looked physically ill, and the rest of the family shifted uncomfortably, watching their carefully constructed world crumble. My phone buzzed again. Marcus, my chief operating officer at Nova. Stocks down 12% and falling. News outlets are picking up the Singapore story. Thank you, Marcus. I kept the phone on speaker, letting them hear every word. Begin contacting major shareholders. They should know there's a way to save their investment if the board accepts Nova's offer. Uncle George surged to his feet. You're destroying your own family's company. No, I corrected calmly. I'm saving it. From you. My father stepped forward, his face a mask of confusion and dawning respect. All this time, Nova Investments was you? I nodded. Every acquisition, every merger, every success they'd been talking about in the financial press. That was all me. The daughter you thought couldn't handle real business. But how? Peter demanded. Where did you get the capital to? Remember grandfather's trust? I smiled at the memory. The one you all laughed at me for accepting instead of company shares? He left me $5 million with one condition, that I use it to build something of my own. Understanding dawned in my father's eyes. The old man knew. He knew exactly what would happen to his company under your leadership, I confirmed, looking at Uncle George. He saw how you valued the Parker name more than Parker innovation, so he made sure at least one of us would carry on his real legacy. My mother touched my arm. Darling, surely we can discuss this as a family. Find some compromise. Like the compromise you offered me 5 years ago. I pulled away from her touch. When you told me I had to accept a token position under Uncle George or leave with nothing. That was different, she protested weakly. You're right, it was. Then you had all the power. Now, I gestured to my phone as another stock alert chimed. Now the positions are reversed. Peter grabbed his own phone, frantically scrolling. 15% drop. The shareholders are panicking. They should be, I said. Once they see the full Singapore report, the stock will be worthless by morning. Unless we accept Nova's offer, my father finished quietly. I pulled out another document from my briefcase, the final acquisition offer. Complete control of Parker Industries, new board, new management, new direction. The Parker name stays, but the old guard goes. Uncle George slammed his fist on the mahogany table. I won't let you steal my company. Your company? I laughed. The same company you drove into the ground with failed expansions and outdated technology. The company you used as your personal piggy bank while letting innovation stagnate. I turned to address the whole room. Did any of you know that Parker Industries hasn't released a truly new product in 3 years? That our R&D department has been gutted to fund Uncle George's vanity projects? That our best engineers have been leaving in droves? Murmurs of concern rippled through the family. They hadn't known, or hadn't wanted to know. The Singapore expansion was supposed to fix everything, Peter said desperately. If you just give us more time. Time? I pulled up more documents on my tablet, projecting them onto the room's large screen. Here's the real Singapore numbers. Not the ones you showed the board. The project is a disaster. You've lost $500 million trying to hide it. Gasps filled the room as the true figures appeared. My aunts clutched their pearls, my cousins whispered frantically among themselves, and Uncle George looked like a man watching his world burn. You've been spying on us, he accused, breaking into private company records. I own 40% of the company, I reminded him. Those records belong to me as much as you. More, actually, since I paid for my shares instead of inheriting them. My father picked up the acquisition offer, reading carefully. These terms, they're actually quite fair. More than fair, I agreed. Nova will absorb all debt. No layoffs below senior management. The Parker name stays on the building. All I want is control. All you want is revenge, Uncle George spat. I met his gaze steadily. If I wanted revenge, I'd let the company collapse. Let everyone see how the mighty Parkers destroyed their own legacy. This offer, this is mercy. Peter grabbed the papers from my father's hands, scanning frantically. What happens to us? The family? You'll retain minimal shares, non-voting stock. Enough to keep you comfortable, but not enough to interfere. I smiled. Consider it severance for years of mismanagement. And if we refuse? Uncle George's voice was dangerous. I shrugged. Then I sell my shares at market open. Once they're public, every vulture fund in the country will know Parker Industries is vulnerable. They won't be as generous as I'm being. As if to emphasize my point, phones around the room chimed with more stock alerts. The price was falling faster now as news of the Singapore disaster spread. My mother tried one last time. Sophia, please. We're family. Family? I laughed bitterly. Was it family when you told me I'd never succeed without the Parker name? When you backed Uncle George as he drove this company into the ground? When you watched silently as everything grandfather built was wasted on vanity and pride? The room fell silent. Even Uncle George had no response. The Parker name means something, I continued, my voice softer now. Not because of its history, but because of what grandfather created. He built this company on innovation, on taking risks, on seeing the future before anyone else. That's the legacy I'm trying to save. My father stepped forward. As chairman of the board, I move we vote on Nova's offer. Robert, Uncle George protested. You can't. Enough, George. My father's voice was firm. Look at the numbers. Look at what you've done to this company. Sophie is offering us a chance to save what's left. One by one, family members nodded. Even Peter, seeing the writing on the wall, slumped in defeat. The vote was quick and unanimous. Within hours, lawyers had been called, papers signed, and Parker Industries officially became a subsidiary of Nova Investments. As shell-shocked family members filed out, Uncle George lingered. "You think you've won," he said bitterly, "but you'll never be the Parker he was." I smiled, thinking of my grandfather's last words to me, his faith in what I could build. "You're right, Uncle George. I'll be better." Because I understood what he really built this company on: innovation, not inheritance. Vision, not vanity. The future, not the past. 1 year later, I stood in my office at the newly renovated Parker Industries headquarters. Under Nova's leadership, the company had transformed. New products were in development, talented engineers were returning, and our stock price had tripled. Uncle George had retired to Florida, nursing his wounded pride with his severance package. Peter had surprised everyone by accepting a lower position in R&D, where he was actually showing promise now that the pressure of leadership was gone. My parents tried repeatedly to reconcile, suddenly proud of their successful daughter. But their dinner invitations went unanswered. I was too busy building something they had never believed possible. A company that valued innovation over inheritance. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. A young engineer stood there, clutching a prototype. "Miss Parker, I have some ideas for the new quantum processor." I smiled, remembering how my own ideas had been dismissed years ago. "Come in, tell me everything." As she excitedly outlined her vision, I felt a deep satisfaction. This was why I built Nova, why I fought so hard for control of Parker Industries. Not to prove my family wrong, but to prove my grandfather right. My phone buzzed, another message from my mother. "The family misses you. The Parker name needs to stay united." I looked around my office at the new Parker Industries logo, at the innovative projects in development, at the future we were building. "The Parker name is doing just fine," I texted back. "Better than ever, actually. Grandfather would be proud." Then I turned back to the young engineer and her ideas. Because that's what the Parker name really meant. Not preserving the past, but building the future. Sometimes you have to lose the family you were born into to honor the legacy you were meant to build. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't taking over the family business. It's showing them what that business could have been all along. As for me, I kept my grandfather's trust document framed on my wall. Not to remember the money he left me, but to remember his real gift, the belief that I could build something greater than my family's expectations. And that's a legacy even the Parker name couldn't buy. The Anderson family's corporate headquarters hadn't changed since I was a child. The same polished marble floors, the same oak-paneled walls, the same crushing weight of expectations and disappointment. Standing in the lobby, I smoothed down my simple black dress. No designer label, nothing to suggest I could buy this entire building without blinking. My name is Emma Anderson, though my family barely acknowledges the last name we share. To them, I'm just the daughter who walked away from the family business 5 years ago, choosing to forge my own path instead of accepting a token position at Anderson Global. If they only knew that I now own Sterling Enterprises, the corporation about to acquire their struggling company. The security guard didn't recognize me, glanced at my visitor badge skeptically. The executive meeting is in the main boardroom. Kitchen's down the hall. I bit back a smile. I know where the kitchen is. I'll find my way. The 20th floor was buzzing with activity. Today's board meeting wasn't just any meeting. It was the final discussion before tomorrow's vote on Sterling's acquisition offer. An offer my family desperately needed to accept, though their pride would never let them admit it. "Emma," my brother Michael's voice carried down the hallway, dripping with fake surprise. "What are you doing here?" I turned to face him, taking in his perfectly tailored suit, the gold watch that probably cost more than what he thought I made in a year. "Hello, Michael. Dad invited me." He raised an eyebrow. "Did he? To the board meeting?" His laugh was sharp. "Come on, Emma. You know this is for actual executives, people who understand business. And what exactly do you think I've been doing for the past 5 years?" I kept my voice level, remembering the stack of acquisition papers waiting in my office across town. Oh right, your little consulting thing. He waved dismissively. How's that going? Still helping small businesses with their bookkeeping? If he only knew that little consulting thing was a cover for my real company, Sterling Enterprises, a corporation that had systematically acquired struggling companies across 3 continents. It pays the bills, I said mildly. Emma, our father's voice boomed from the boardroom doorway. Richard Anderson, CEO of Anderson Global, looked exactly as I remembered. Commanding presence, steel gray hair, and eyes that could freeze hell. You came. I nodded. You asked me to. Yes, well, he glanced at his watch. The meeting's about to start. Why don't you wait in the kitchen? Martha can bring you coffee. Michael smirked. The kitchen is where you belong. Successful people only in the boardroom. I thought about the past 5 years, building Sterling from the ground up, orchestrating deals that made Michael's biggest acquisitions look like pocket change, all while letting my family believe I was barely scraping by. Actually, I started, but was cut off by the arrival of Anderson Global's CFO, Thomas Wright. He hurried down the hallway, clutching a folder and looking worried. Mr. Anderson, we need to discuss these projections before the meeting. The numbers from last quarter. Not now, Thomas. My father's tone was sharp. We have more important matters to discuss. The Sterling offer is nowhere near what this company is worth. Michael interrupted confidently. We'll reject it. Find another buyer. I had to stifle a laugh. I knew exactly what Anderson Global was worth. I'd spent months analyzing every detail, every weakness, every skeleton in their corporate closet. The kitchen, Emma, my father reminded me firmly. This isn't your concern. I walked toward the kitchen, their voices fading behind me. 5 years ago, I would have been hurt by the dismissal. Now it was almost amusing. Let them have their meeting, their illusion of control. Tomorrow everything would change. The kitchen was exactly as I remembered. State-of-the-art appliances that were barely used since the entire floor ordered takeout for every meal. Martha, the office manager who had worked here since I was a child, looked up in surprise. Emma, is that really you? I smiled, giving her a warm hug. She had always been kind to me, even after I left the family business. Hello, Martha. Still keeping this place running? She sighed, glancing at the boardroom. Trying to. Things haven't been the same since you left. Your brother? She lowered her voice. Well, let's just say some of his decisions haven't worked out so well. I knew exactly which decision she meant. Michael's failed expansion into Asian markets, the botched merger with Tech Solutions, the string of harassment complaints from female employees that had been quietly settled, all documented in Sterling's due diligence report. I heard about the Sterling offer, Martha continued, pouring me coffee. Between us, we need it. The company's not doing well, no matter what your father says. Is that why Dad invited me today, to witness their triumph over another buyer? Martha's expression turned knowing. Actually, he didn't invite you. Thomas did, said it was important you be here. Now that was interesting. Thomas Wright had been Anderson Global's CFO for 20 years. He was also the only person in the company who knew exactly how bad things were. My phone buzzed. A text from my assistant at Sterling. Everything's ready for tomorrow. Board votes confirmed. Contracts prepared. I smiled, remembering Michael's smug face. Successful people only in the boardroom. Well, tomorrow they'd learn what real success looked like. Through the kitchen door, I could hear the board meeting starting. My father's voice carried clearly, still the commanding presence, still convinced he could control everything. As you know, we've received an acquisition offer from Sterling Enterprises. While the terms are generous, Anderson Global doesn't need a savior. We've weathered challenges before. Michael's voice chimed in. Exactly. This company was built by Andersons, and it will stay in Anderson hands. I had to admire their confidence, misplaced as it was. They had no idea that their company had been bleeding money for years, that their major clients were already in talks with Sterling, that tomorrow's vote was a mere formality. The kitchen door swung open, and Thomas slipped in, looking harried. He froze when he saw me, then quickly closed the door behind him. Miss Anderson, he said quietly, or should I say, Miss Sterling. My coffee cup paused halfway to my lips. How long have you known? He smiled tiredly. I've been tracking Sterling's acquisitions for years. The pattern, the methodology, it had your fingerprints all over it. When I saw the offer, I knew. Does anyone else know? No, but they will tomorrow, won't they? I set down my cup. They left me no choice, Thomas. Michael's running this company into the ground, and Dad's too proud to stop him. He nodded. I know. That's why I made sure you were here today. They need to see. They need to understand what they've lost. Through the door, Michael's voice rose excitedly. In fact, I've just closed a deal that will show Sterling exactly who they're dealing with. The Zhang merger. I winced. The Zhang merger. A desperate attempt to enter the Chinese market that would have bankrupted Anderson Global if Sterling hadn't already arranged to block it. Thomas checked his watch. The CFO of Sterling should be calling any minute to discuss the Zhang deal. Right on cue, my phone rang. I answered, putting it on speaker. Go ahead, Marcus. Ms. Sterling, the Zhang contracts have been canceled as arranged. Would you like me to inform Anderson Global now or wait until tomorrow's board meeting? Thomas's eyes widened at my title. Even he hadn't known I was CEO. Now is fine, I said, loud enough to carry through the door. They should know exactly who they're dealing with. The kitchen door burst open. Michael stood there, face red with anger. What did you just say? Who are you talking to? I stood up slowly, smoothing my simple dress. Marcus, please hold. I believe I'll deliver this news in person. Walking past my stunned brother, I entered the boardroom where my father and the board members sat in frozen silence. For the first time in 5 years, I took my place at the head of the table. The Zhang merger is dead, I announced calmly, just like every other desperate attempt to save this company will be. Unless, of course, you accept Sterling's offer. My father's face had turned ashen. What are you talking about? How do you know about Zhang? I smiled, thinking of all the times they'd sent me to the kitchen, dismissed my ideas, treated me as less than nothing. Because, Dad, I'm the CEO of Sterling Enterprises. And tomorrow, one way or another, this company will be mine. The silence in the boardroom was deafening. 20 faces stared at me in shock, their expressions ranging from disbelief to horror as my words sank in. My father gripped the arms of his chair, his knuckles white. Michael had collapsed into a seat, his arrogance evaporating like morning dew. Marcus, I spoke into my phone, still on speaker. Please send in the transition team. Right away, Miss Sterling. My father found his voice first. This is impossible. Sterling Enterprises is a multi-billion-dollar corporation. You're just what, Dad? I met his gaze steadily. Just the daughter you sent to the kitchen? Just the failure who walked away from the family business? The boardroom doors opened and my team walked in, senior executives from Sterling, legal counsel, financial analysts. All people who had worked with me for years, who knew exactly who I was and what I was capable of. Ladies and gentlemen, I addressed the board. You have less than 24 hours to accept Sterling's offer. If you refuse, we'll proceed with our alternative strategy. Michael laughed nervously. Alternative strategy? What alternative strategy? I nodded to my CFO, who distributed folders to each board member. Over the past 3 years, Sterling has systematically acquired controlling interests in your major clients' companies. We've also purchased a significant portion of your debt. If you reject our offer, we'll simply redirect the business elsewhere. The board members flipped through the documents, their faces growing paler with each page. They were seeing the truth, how thoroughly I had outmaneuvered them, how completely I controlled their fate. This is corporate terrorism, Michael shouted, jumping to his feet. You can't do this. Actually, I can. And I have. I pulled out another folder. Would you like to discuss the Zhang merger, brother? Or perhaps we should talk about the harassment settlements you thought you buried. He sank back into his chair, the blood draining from his face. My father stood slowly, his authority crumbling like a sandcastle at high tide. Why, Emma? Why go to all this trouble? If you wanted to come back. Come back? I cut him off. To what? A token position? Another lecture about knowing my place? I gestured to my team. I built something better, something you never thought I could do. Thomas, still standing by the door, cleared his throat. The company's financials, they're worse than anyone here knows. Without this merger. Shut up, Michael snapped. We don't need their money. Actually, I said quietly, you do. Your last 3 quarters have shown significant losses. The Zhang merger would have bankrupted you. Your stock price is about to plummet when the market opens tomorrow. I paused. Unless, of course, you announce your merger with Sterling Enterprises. One of the board members, an elderly man who had known me since childhood, spoke up. The terms of the merger. They're fair. I nodded. More than fair. Sterling will absorb all debt, protect all jobs except senior management, and maintain the Anderson name on subsidiary projects. I met my father's eyes. I'm not here to destroy what you built. I'm here to save it from those who never understood its true value. The room erupted in whisper conversations. Board members huddled over documents, analyzing numbers they should have questioned years ago. My father stood frozen, watching his empire slip through his fingers. Michael, desperate now, tried one last play. The investors won't stand for this. The Anderson family name means nothing without results, I finished. Check your phones, everyone. The market just opened in Hong Kong. News of the Zhang merger failure should be hitting any moment. As if on cue, phones began buzzing around the room. The color drained from faces as board members saw their stock price beginning its predicted dive. Time's up, I announced. You have two choices. Accept Sterling's offer now, before the U.S. markets open, or watch this company collapse by closing bell. The board chairman cleared his throat. I move we vote immediately on the Sterling acquisition offer. Seconded, came a chorus of voices. My father held up a hand. Wait. Jess. Wait. He turned to me, and for the first time, I saw something new in his eyes, respect tinged with fear. All this time you were building this? Planning this? No, Dad. I was building something successful. Something meaningful. The fact that it led here. I shrugged. That's just business. The vote was quick and unanimous. Even Michael, seeing the writing on the wall, raised his hand in favor. Within an hour, papers were signed, press releases drafted, and Anderson Global officially became a subsidiary of Sterling Enterprises. As the board members filed out, many stopping to shake my hand with newfound deference, Martha appeared at the door. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears of pride. I always knew you were meant for more than the kitchen, she whispered, hugging me tight. Michael was the last to leave, his swagger replaced by defeated shuffle. At the door, he paused. Was any of it real? Your struggling consultant act. Every great business person knows the value of market research, I replied. I learned exactly how this company was being run, by watching from the kitchen. Only my father remained, standing at the window that overlooked the city skyline. What happens now? Now? I joined him at the window. Now we rebuild. Make this company what it should have been. One that values merit over inheritance, innovation over tradition. And us, your family? I thought about all the family dinners where my ideas were dismissed, all the meetings I was barred from, all the times I was told to know my place. You'll always be my father, I said finally. But this? I gestured to the boardroom. This is business. And in business, I stopped being just your daughter a long time ago. He nodded slowly, understanding at last. When did you become this? I always was this, Dad. You just never bothered to look past your own expectations to see it. The next few months transformed Anderson Global. Under Sterling's leadership, toxic management was cleared out, innovative projects were given priority, and the company's value steadily climbed. Michael found himself working under a female VP half his age, learning what real business acumen looked like. My father retired, though we both knew it wasn't really his choice. He sent me message after message, trying to rebuild our relationship now that he understood my true capabilities. But some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt with simple apologies. 1 year later, I stood in my office at Sterling's headquarters, looking out over the city. My assistant entered with the morning reports. Your brother's here to see you, she said quietly. Says it's important. I smiled, remembering his words from that day. The kitchen is where you belong. Successful people only in the boardroom. Tell him he can wait in the kitchen, I replied. I'm busy running a successful company. Success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. Sometimes you have to leave the table where you're not welcome to build your own empire. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't taking over the family business. It's making them realize they never really knew what business was at all. As for me, I still visit the kitchen at Anderson Global sometimes. Not because anyone sends me there, but because that's where I first learned the most valuable lesson in business. The people at the top don't always see what's really going on. But if you're willing to start at the bottom, learn every detail, and work harder than anyone else. One day, you might just find yourself signing their checks. And that's a business lesson even my family had to respect. I never planned to own a healthcare empire. Growing up in a family of prestigious doctors, all I wanted was to help people. But life has a way of reshaping your dreams, especially when those closest to you keep trying to break them. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and according to my family, I'm the disappointment who couldn't hack it as a real doctor. What they don't know is that I'm the CEO of Horizon Healthcare Group, the corporation about to acquire their precious hospital chain. The irony wasn't lost on me as I parked my Tesla outside my parents' sprawling mansion for our monthly family dinner. Inside, my Uncle David, chief of surgery at Mitchell Memorial Hospital, would undoubtedly spend another evening mocking my career choices. My cousin James, the golden boy resident, would smirk from across the table, and my parents would sit in silence, their disappointment heavy in the air. None of them knew that tomorrow morning, their hospital's board would vote on a merger with Horizon Healthcare. None of them realized that the failed doctor they loved to ridicule now controlled 37 hospitals across the country. I smoothed down my simple blue dress. No designer labels, nothing to suggest I could buy and sell their hospital 10 times over. The act had become second nature over the past 5 years. Let them think I'm barely scraped by running a small healthcare consulting firm. Let them believe I was nothing without the Mitchell name. The front door opened before I could ring the bell. My mother stood there, perfect as always in her tailored suit, silver hair styled just so. "You're late," she said by way of greeting. "Surgery ran long," I replied automatically, then caught myself. My meeting ran long. Her lips tightened at the reminder that I no longer performed surgery. "Everyone's waiting in the dining room. Try not to embarrass us tonight." The familiar scent of roasted lamb and family judgment hit me as I walked into the dining room. Uncle David held court at one end of the table, gesturing with his wine glass as he regaled everyone with another tale of his surgical prowess. "Sarah," he boomed when he saw me, "finally decided to join us? We were just discussing James's incredible performance in the OR today. Complex cardiac procedure. But then you wouldn't know much about that anymore, would you?" I took my usual seat at the far end of the table, as far from the medical discussions as possible. James picked up the conversation eagerly. "It was incredible, actually. The patient had a rare condition." "Speaking of rare conditions," Uncle David cut in, "how's that little consulting business of yours, Sarah? Still giving advice to real doctors?" The table grew quiet, waiting for my response. I could feel my father's disapproving stare, my mother's quiet shame. 5 years ago, I had walked away from my surgical residency at Mitchell Memorial, refusing to continue under my uncle's tyrannical leadership. "The business is fine," I said calmly, serving myself some vegetables. "How's the hospital's acquisition going?" Uncle David's face darkened. Mitchell Memorial and its affiliated hospitals had been struggling financially for years, though he'd never admit it. Tomorrow's vote on the merger with Horizon Healthcare was their last hope of avoiding bankruptcy. "That's not dinner conversation," he snapped. "Besides, what would you know about running a hospital? You couldn't even handle a residency." I thought about the documents sitting on my desk at Horizon's headquarters, waiting for tomorrow's signing. About the years of strategic planning that had led to this moment. You'd be surprised what I know about hospital administration. My cousin Emily, always eager to pile on, jumped in. "Oh please, you work with those small private practices, right? Telling them how to file insurance papers or whatever." She laughed. "That's not exactly running a major hospital system." "Still a nobody after medical school." Uncle David chuckled, raising his wine glass. "Such a waste of a Mitchell education." The familiar words stung less than they used to. I heard them so many times over the years. During my residency, when I questioned his dangerous practices, when I reported his negligence to the board, who predictably did nothing, and especially when I finally walked away. "David," my father spoke up half-heartedly, "perhaps we should discuss something else." "Why?" Uncle David demanded. "She needs to hear this. Look at James, chief resident at 30, on track to be the youngest department head in hospital history. And what's Sarah doing? Playing consultant to strip mall doctors." I took a sip of water, letting his words wash over me. Tomorrow they would all learn exactly what I'd been doing for the past 5 years. How I'd built Horizon Healthcare from the ground up, acquiring struggling hospitals and turning them into state-of-the-art facilities. How I'd revolutionize patient care while maintaining profitability. Tell me, Sarah, James said with fake concern. Do you ever regret giving up? Walking away from real medicine? I met his gaze steadily. No, James. I don't regret walking away from toxic leadership and dangerous practices. I don't regret choosing to help patients in a different way. Toxic leadership. Uncle David's face turned red. I made you. Everything you know about surgery you learned from me, including how to falsify post-op reports. I asked quietly, how to rush procedures to boost numbers, how to silence nurses who report mistakes. The table fell silent. These accusations weren't new. I'd raised them during my residency, filed formal complaints that mysteriously disappeared, but no one in the family ever discussed them openly. You dare. Uncle David started, but my mother cut him off. Sarah, if you're just going to dredge up ancient history, perhaps you should leave. I looked around the table at my family. Uncle David, the prestigious surgeon who prioritized his reputation over patient safety. James, following eagerly in his footsteps. My parents, who had chosen silence over support. Tomorrow, everything would change. Ancient history has a way of catching up, I said, standing up. Especially when it comes to hospital administration. What's that supposed to mean? Uncle David demanded. You'll find out tomorrow at the board meeting. I couldn't resist giving them the small hint of what was coming. The merger vote? James frowned. What would you know about that? I picked up my purse, ready to leave the suffocating atmosphere of judgment and medical superiority. More than you think, much more. Running away again. Uncle David called after me. That's what you do best, isn't it? I paused at the dining room door, thinking about the empire I'd built, the changes I'd implemented, the patients I'd helped through system-wide reforms rather than individual surgeries. I never ran away, Uncle David. I just found a better way to practice medicine, one that doesn't require compromising ethics for ego. As I walked out, I heard my mother's embarrassed apologies, Uncle David's blustering denials, James's confused questions. Tomorrow, they would understand exactly what the failed doctor had accomplished. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. A text from Marcus, my chief operating officer. Everything's set for tomorrow's board meeting. All votes confirmed. They won't know what hit them. I smiled, thinking about Uncle David's face when he realized who really controlled his hospital's fate. About James learning that his fast track to department head would soon hit a dead end. About my parents finally understanding that I had succeeded not despite walking away, but because of it. Perfect, I texted back. Time to show them what real hospital administration looks like. The Mitchell Memorial Hospital boardroom looked exactly as I remembered it. All mahogany panels and leather chairs designed to impress rather than inspire. 5 years ago, I'd stood in this very room, presenting evidence of patient safety violations to a board that chose to protect their own rather than do what was right. Now, at 8:45 a.m., I sat in my car in the parking lot, watching the board members arrive. Uncle David's Mercedes pulled in, followed by James's BMW. They walked together toward the entrance, probably rehearsing their pitch to save the hospital from acquisition. If only they knew. My phone buzzed. Marcus confirming he was already inside with our legal team. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror, adjusting my crisp white blazer. Today, I wasn't wearing the simple clothes of last night's dinner. Today, I dressed like what I was. The CEO of a billion-dollar healthcare corporation. At exactly 9 a.m., I walked into the boardroom. The conversation stopped mid-sentence as heads turned toward me. Uncle David's face morphed from confusion to anger. Sarah? What are you doing here? This is a private board meeting. I smiled, setting my briefcase on the table. I know exactly what this meeting is, Uncle David. In fact, I called it. James laughed nervously. What are you talking about? This is about the Horizon Healthcare merger. Exactly. I nodded to Marcus, who stood and distributed folders to each board member. As CEO of Horizon Healthcare Group, I thought I should be present for this discussion. The silence that followed was deafening. Uncle David's face drained of color. James dropped his pen, mouth hanging open. The other board members shifted uncomfortably, suddenly realizing who really held their fate in her hands. This is impossible, Uncle David finally sputtered. You run a small consulting firm. You're not. Horizon Healthcare's CEO. I finished for him. Actually, I am. Have been for 5 years. Ever since I left the toxic environment you created here. I opened my briefcase, pulling out the final merger documents. While you were busy mocking my career choices, I was building a healthcare empire. 37 hospitals across the country, all operating under strict ethical guidelines and patient-first policies. The board chairman cleared his throat. Ms. Mitchell, perhaps you could clarify something. The merger terms we received are non-negotiable, I confirmed. Horizon Healthcare will assume complete control of Mitchell Memorial and its affiliated hospitals. We'll implement our standard protocols for patient care, staff oversight, and operational transparency. Uncle David slammed his hand on the table. This is ridiculous. You can't just walk in here and... Actually, I can. I pulled up financial projections on the room's main screen. Mitchell Memorial has been operating at a loss for 3 years. Your surgical complication rates are above national averages. Staff turnover is at an all-time high. Face it, Uncle David, your leadership has driven this hospital into the ground. James leaned forward, his arrogance cracking. But my position, my track to department head, will be reevaluated based on merit, not family connections. I met his eyes coldly. Horizon Healthcare promotes based on competence, not last names. The board members were already reviewing the documents, their expressions shifting from shock to resignation. They knew the hospital couldn't survive without this merger. Uncle David stood up, his face red with fury. I won't let you destroy my legacy. Your legacy? I laughed. You mean the legacy of rushed surgeries, of intimidated staff, of covered-up mistakes? I pulled out one final folder. Remember these? The incident reports I filed during my residency? The ones that mysteriously disappeared. He froze. How did you? I kept copies, along with statements from nurses, technicians, and patients who were too afraid to speak up while you were in charge. I spread the documents on the table. Would you like the board to review them now? The board chairman spoke up, his voice firm. I think we've seen enough. Shall we proceed with the vote? One by one, the board members raised their hands in favor of the merger. Uncle David watched helplessly as his empire crumbled. James slumped in his chair, his fast track to success suddenly derailed. Excellent, I said, passing out the final contracts. Horizon Healthcare will begin implementing changes immediately. First order of business, a complete audit of all surgical procedures from the past 5 years. You can't do this, Uncle David whispered, but his voice had lost its power. I already have. I signed the last document with a flourish. Oh, and Uncle David, consider this your 2 weeks' notice. Horizon Healthcare has a strict policy against administrators with documented ethics violations. As the board members filed out, Marcus began setting up for our transition team meeting. I stayed seated, watching Uncle David's world collapse around him. Was this your plan all along? He asked bitterly. Buy the hospital just for revenge? I shook my head. This isn't about revenge. It's about doing what's right for the patients. Something you never understood. James lingered by the door, his arrogance replaced by uncertainty. What happens to me? That depends on you, I replied. If you're willing to learn to put patients before prestige, there might be a place for you. But not as department head. You'll have to earn that, just like everyone else. After they left, I stood at the window of what was now my hospital, looking out at the building where I'd started my medical career. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Is it true? You own Horizon Healthcare? I typed back, yes, and now I own Mitchell Memorial too. Still think I wasted my medical degree? The response came quickly. We should talk. Come to dinner tonight. I smiled, remembering all the family dinners spent being belittled and dismissed. Sorry, can't make it. Board meeting with my other hospitals. You understand, successful people are always busy. Turning back to the conference room, I addressed my transition team. Let's begin the audit. I want every incident report, every patient complaint, every staffing decision reviewed. It's time to show them what real medical leadership looks like. Over the next few months, Mitchell Memorial transformed. Gone were the rushed surgeries and intimidated staff. We implemented strict safety protocols, anonymous reporting systems, and merit-based promotions. The hospital's ratings improved, staff turnover dropped, and patient satisfaction soared. Uncle David retired rather than face the audit results. James, surprisingly, chose to stay and learn. Under proper supervision, without the pressure to cut corners, he actually became a decent surgeon. My parents tried repeatedly to reconcile, suddenly proud of their successful daughter. But their dinner invitations went unanswered. I was too busy building something they had never believed possible. A healthcare system that valued ethics over egos, patience over prestige. 1 year later, I stood in the newly renovated lobby of Mitchell Memorial, now the flagship hospital of Horizon Healthcare Group. The wall of past chiefs of surgery had been replaced by our patient care commitment statement. Uncle David's portrait was gone, along with the toxic culture he had created. A young resident approached me, clutching a patient safety proposal. "Dr. Mitchell, do you have a moment?" I smiled, remembering how my own suggestions had been dismissed years ago. "Always. Tell me your ideas." As she excitedly outlined her plans for improving post-operative care, I felt a deep satisfaction. This was why I built Horizon Healthcare, not to prove my family wrong, but to create an environment where good medicine could flourish. My phone buzzed. Another text from my mother. "Your cousin James says the hospital has never run better. We were wrong about you. Please come home." I looked around at my hospital, at the positive changes we'd implemented, at the lives we were saving the right way. This was my home now. This was my legacy. "Thanks," I texted back, "but I am home, and I'm exactly where I belong." Success isn't just about proving others wrong. It's about creating something right, something that helps people, something that lasts. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building something better than those who doubted you could ever imagine. And doing it not for them, but for every patient who deserves care without compromise, every medical professional who deserves respect without intimidation, and every dream that deserves a chance to become reality. That's what real medicine looks like. That's what real success means. And that's a diagnosis even my family couldn't argue with.